The movie is set in rural France, where a widow named Virginie lives with her 2 children, Laura and Gaston. Virginie is a single and independent woman who raises locusts for a living. She believes that it is a lucrative business, as the insects are high in protein. Even the kid, Gaston, has kept one as a pet in his room. However, Laura isn't happy with her mother's profession, as she often gets bullied over it by her schoolmates. Before this, the family used to raise goats when Virginie's husband was still alive. However, that changed after he took his own life, leaving the family to fend for themselves. In the next scene, we get to know that Virginie is struggling to make ends meet, as the locusts are not reproducing at a large enough volume. She tries every possible solution, but the end results are the same. The insects just won't multiply. One day, Virginie's regular buyer, Briand, arrives to look at the year's produce. She offers the barbecued insect sample to him, which impresses him instantly. However, when he learns that she has only managed to produce 40 kilos of locusts this year, he angrily tells her that he can't work with such a small amount. He wants a heavy discount on these insects, but Virginie refuses and sends him away. Later, she shares the bad news with her daughter, but requests her not to tell Gaston anything about it. With no other source of income, Virginie borrows some money from a man named Karim. It turns out the latter is a close family friend who immigrated to France just a few years back. Meanwhile, Laura's bullies upload a video online, making fun of her mother. This finally begins to take a toll on the teenager, and she starts becoming angrier by the day. Elsewhere, a bored Gaston takes his pet locust out to play, but to his surprise, the insect starts feeding on his wound. This reveals that Virginie's locusts are interested in human flesh and blood. One day, the children are helping their mother deliver locust-based products to a department store. In a parking lot, Laura notices her classmate, Kevin, the boy who posted the video online, and goes to confront him. However, Kevin doubles down on his behavior and taunts Laura about her late father. The comment sends her off the edge, and she attacks Kevin in the face. However, the boy also retaliates by punching her back in the eye. Things are about to take a bad turn, but fortunately, Virginie arrives in the nick of time and separates them. Later, as the family reaches home, Laura vents her frustration on her mother. She says that she's fed up living in a house where she can't even shower without seeing a locust. Moreover, she is tired of being the laughingstock in her school, where everyone looks at her like an outcast. After Laura finally calms down, Virginie applies ice on her wounds and reveals that she has received an offer for the 40 kilograms of locusts. She says that, although he's not paying as much as she wants, it's a decent amount, adding that if she sells her lab along with the insects, she can have enough money to move somewhere else and start a new life. Hearing all this, Laura finally becomes happy. The next day, the buyer, who turns out to be a duck farmer, arrives to buy the insects. However, when he sees that they are tiny and weak, he asks for a discount. He rudely tells Virginie that he's only going to pay her 200 euros instead of the previously agreed 600. As expected, this infuriates the poor woman, and she kicks him out of her property. Then she storms inside the locust enclosure and angrily trashes the nests. In the process, Virginie trips over and knocks herself out. Later, when she wakes up, she discovers the locusts eating from wounds on her arm. Terrified, she quickly shakes the insects off and gets out of the enclosure. The next day, after sending her kids to school, Virginie goes over to check on the locusts. To her astonishment, she notices that they've become more active overnight. Virginie speculates that it could have something to do with the blood they sucked out of her wound. Desperate for a change in circumstances, she partially opens the enclosure, unbandages her arm, and allows the locusts to feed from her. By night, the insects become much larger and stronger. It's almost like they are receiving protein from the blood. The next morning, Virginie dons the whole protective suit to inspect the enclosure. She notices that the locusts are multiplying at a rapid rate and laying eggs like crazy. Although this is a very unusual situation, Virginie decides to take advantage of it. She hires Karim and builds a much bigger enclosure to keep the insects. Virginie lies to him that she fed the insects partially to get them to be more active. When Laura returns home and learns about the development, she isn't pleased, as she was hoping her mother would stop the business altogether. As the days pass, Virginie continues to secretly feed the insects with her blood. She becomes weaker by the day, but she doesn't care, as long as she earns well and keeps her children happy. The harvest day finally arrives, and Virginie produces 150 kilos of locust flour. She takes them to the duck farmer, and this time, the latter seems to be impressed. He offers her a reasonable rate of 1,000 euros. Afterwards, Virginie orders 30 liters of blood to feed her locusts. As time passes, the insects become increasingly louder, and they constantly remind Laura of the humiliation she faced in school because of them. One day, in a fit of rage, she tears open one of the greenhouses, which allows a swarm of locusts to escape. Gaston, who is sitting in a truck with his go-to-get tied in the back, watches it all unfold. Unfortunately, the deadly insects get attracted by the goat and immediately attack it. When they finally leave, Huguette is nowhere to be seen. After a while, Virginie returns from a trip to town, and Gaston cries to her that Huguette was taken by the locusts. Alarmed, she immediately inspects the greenhouses and finds out that Laura caused the tear in the greenhouse. This enrages her so much that she locks the teenager in a room as a punishment. After this, Virginie goes out to look for Huguette, hoping he is still alive. But to her dismay, she finds him in a field covered in locusts that are feeding on her. Virginie is taken aback by the devastation the insects have caused, but she decides to hide it from her son. To mend her relationship with Laura and to keep Gaston from thinking about his goat, Virginie takes the children to the beach for a picnic. She also surprises her daughter with a brand new scooter, making her happy. Later, Karim takes Virginie to his farm for wine tasting. One thing leads to another, and they start making out. Karim proceeds to take it a level higher, but she refuses to remove her clothing to hide the open wounds all over her body, and returns home. The next day, Virginie orders some more blood for her locusts, but the buyer becomes suspicious and tells her that she needs to present a license. This proves to be a major roadblock for Virginie, as now she doesn't have any source of food for her locusts. However, she refuses to stop and continues to expand her farm. She again starts drawing out her own blood to feed the insects. Over time, her mental state begins to deteriorate, and she starts pushing people away from her. After reaching her physical limit, Virginie starts looking for blood elsewhere. One night, she notices her neighbor's dog roaming around her farm and decides to feed the poor animal to the insects. However, her reign of terror doesn't stop there. She even steals cows from nearby farms and feeds them to her locusts. The night escapades begin to take a toll on Virginie's mental and physical health. She can't even bring herself to see off Gaston to his football camp. One day, Laura finds her mother's room open, and when she goes inside, she notices bloody clothing on the floor. She rushes to the greenhouses to ask her mother about it, only to find a naked Virginie being fed upon by the locusts. Horrified, Laura runs back to the house and locks herself in the washroom. She then contacts Karim over text and asks him to come as soon as possible because her mother is not well. When he arrives, he finds Virginie overworking herself. Karim advises her to rest and then takes the mother-daughter duo to his home for a movie night. Later, when he and Laura are alone in the kitchen, he inquires why he called her. However, she is unable to tell him what's wrong with Virginie and only says, "Locusts." As Karim presses her to open up, Virginie suddenly shows up and starts arguing. Meanwhile, Virginie's neighbor goes into one of the greenhouses, looking for his dog. Unfortunately, he makes the grave mistake of opening the pockets of locusts, releasing them into the open. Later that night, Karim drops the mother-daughter duo home and bids them goodbye. After they enter the house, he begins to look around the greenhouses to get to the bottom of the truth. Lo and behold, he finds the half-eaten body of the neighbor who had been looking for his dog. Horrified, Karim walks back outside, where he encounters Virginie. They again get into an argument, and the crazy woman runs back to her house to confront Laura. She asks the teenager what she told Karim, but the latter refuses to talk to her mother and locks herself inside. Meanwhile, Karim goes to his truck and takes out a tank of gasoline. He then douses the greenhouses completely and lights them on fire. After noticing the commotion, Virginie runs outside and tries to stop Karim, but he throws her to the ground. Just then, the two realize that the locusts have escaped the enclosure and are gathering in numbers. Fearing for his life, Karim lets Virginie go and runs into the house, asking Laura to close all doors and windows. But the idiotic Virginie is still adamant about saving her business. She attempts to put out the fire using the fire extinguisher. However, when she hears her daughter screaming, she rushes to the house. On the way, she finds poor Karim covered and being eaten by locusts. Somehow, Laura manages to escape from the house and runs into a nearby forest, followed by Virginie. The teenager is chased by the swarm, forcing her to run towards the lake. She notices an overturned boat, so she decides to hide under it to protect herself from the deadly insects. However, the locusts refuse to leave her alone and swarm the boat. The combined weight of the locusts start pushing the boat down, and Laura slowly drowns. After a while, Virginie arrives at the lake, and when she sees that her daughter is in danger, she takes out a pocket knife and cuts open her palms. She then covers her face with her blood and beckons the swarm towards her. The plan works, and the locusts immediately surround her, hence saving the teenager's life. When Laura realizes what has happened, she swims out from underneath the boat. Meanwhile, after attracting the locusts towards her, Virginie dives deep into the water, taking them along with her. She stays inside for around a minute, ensuring that all insects have drowned to their deaths. When she finally resurfaces, she approaches her daughter and hugs her tightly. The movie ends as Virginie promises to Laura that she will end her locust business now.